Start over here, welcome. All
right.
Okay. Is this the order?
We're pulling in
Center panelists, is this our order? This way? Okay. As you can see, we're all anarchists, so we're trying to get organized.
But you're united now.
Yeah, but we're trying to get organized for you. When are we? Here, and some of us are wandering minstrels. Yeah, they're wandering minstrels. We all have bios in the conference program, so I won't take too much of your time with who anyone is. I'm Louise Bernikow, and I'm not going to read any poems of my own. I want to tell you a little bit of a story. And Alta has books outside, right?
Yes. I see new.
Okay, I'm going to pass this around. Many of the themes that I heard yesterday are embodied in what we're going to not talk about, but embody, but be today. And one of them is about the international reach of our movement. And so this book is also called, I know there's another book with the same title, and she has profoundly apologized, and she didn't mean it. This book is called The World Split Open, and it's a collection of poetry by English and American women from, anyway, before our time. And 1552 was an odd number, to 1950. And it's published by the I brought the Women's Press in London edition just to remind us all of a shared culture that had nothing to do with national boundaries. It was also published here. And the way this happened is that I was in graduate school. We all have different trajectories to second wave feminism, and I was not a red diaper baby, I was not an SDS person, and I wasn't really, I mean, my heart was, but I didn't do anything in the civil rights movement. I was in graduate school and when the Vietnam War broke out, and that's really what woke me up. And as part of being a freelance, sometimes journalist for underground newspapers, I went to Washington during the protests that were called the May Day protests in Washington, where the vets coming back who had turned against the war threw their medals at Congress, if you remember that. And actually, I can't remember, if there was a statue they threw. At any rate, it was a really overpowering demonstration, and in order to cover it for an underground newspaper, I had to go to the basement of the Capitol, where press credentials by the Washington police were given out, no matter what you had with you, you know, your own rat, or even Village Voice was an underground paper in those days. And I went there, and the other people in this big round room in the Capitol were the kind of men who cover wars, war correspondents, big, tall men, and the secretary at the front of the room, whose job it was to dole out these press credentials, she said, "Sisters first." And the sea parted. I mean, literally, the sea parted. And I think maybe there were 3 women, including me. And we got our credentials, and I thought, oh my, I mean, I got it. I totally got it, head to toe, in my heart, in my brain, in everything. And I went back to my graduate work at Columbia in English literature, and I'm pretending I just got to see these things for the sake of the story, but they've been boiling and boiling and boiling for quite some time. First of all, you could get a degree in English literature from Columbia University and never read a woman. That was easy. The campus had, just a reminder, a wonderful library with names inscribed all around.
They're still there.
I know they are. And some women dropped a banner over those names at some recent. Were you part of that? Okay, well they did. Anyway, the names around the library are the usual suspects, right? you know, Homer, Virgil, and Ian. Muriel Rukeyser, who wrote the introduction to my book, said that it was her impression that in colleges and universities, the women came after Easter in the curriculum. So, if they came at all, that's right. So we've all come from a place where women were, it's so astonishing to even believe that this could happen, that women's writings and women people were really absent from both the academic and cultural world that we grew up in. And when they were present, and this is really what my project was. So my thinking was not only, I'm in graduate school, I'm studying English literature, there are no women on deck for us to talk about. There are no women teaching me, but there's a culture out, you know, on my corner, I would run into Adrienne Rich, and on my other corner, I would run into June Jordan, and they would say things like, we're gonna read some poems, you know, at the firehouse Tuesday night. Wanna just come? And I said, of course. You know, so before we had Twitter, before we had email, this is what happened at Seneca Falls also, right? That the communication was person to person. And someday, I don't think anybody's mapped this enough. I would call it the social history of feminism in our time. Who your friends were, who lived in your neighborhood, and what they were doing. Because I certainly didn't learn about this stuff reading. Even I went to that session about places and the feminist periodicals, which is where I read wonderful material, but it's not where I was alerted to events. I mean, they came out too late, you know, so it was all about what people around me were doing. And I was infected head to toe by feminism. And when I thought about what we had all inherited, and particularly about poetry, because I can't think of another form, really, that embodies and allows expression of consciousness than poetry. I thought, why the most famous poem by a woman in the whole world in the early 1970s was, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways," right? And so that led me to the whole question of the politics of what survives and what doesn't. As we all know, we've all been doing it for 40 years. What survives, not just in terms of history, who was there and what they did and how things changed, but also what survives as literature. What gets into book form, what gets into an anthology, what gets printed and reprinted, who has access and who makes the decisions. And that was really the basis for my, here's a modest claim, for my rewriting the canon of women and American poets in 1974, and that's what this book is, you know. So these are the poets who I had never heard of, who I hope you all have heard of some of these by now. And I want to talk about two of them just quickly. Why are they not included, right? Who has made the decisions that give life to what women have written? You know, usually, even when women were allowed into the, allowed a seat at the high table, as we used to say, what kind of women were they? Were they reflecting patriarchal, I haven't heard patriarchal today, were they reflecting patriarchal values or what? And there's a whole rebellious tradition. I mean, by now, because of the work of lots of scholars, lots of women's studies, people and lots of plain, ordinary, smart women, with or without degrees, we know about a lot more of them than we did then. But the point is, which aspects of their work do we know? And so I would say, you know, for example, Gertrude Stein is considered like unfathomable and crazy and hard to follow. And one of the things we did after I had collected these was myself and my friend Honor Moore and Odetta, the blues singer, went around doing little shows of readings from this book, and one was a long poem by Gertrude Stein called Patriarchal Poetry, Lifting Belly, in which she talks about patriarchal poetry. So, you know, we haven't invented these words. The job then was to excavate them from the past and bring them up to the present. So I had different poems by people who we all thought we knew, and I had poets who nobody had ever heard of. And top to bottom, I was really trying to revolutionize the world of this stuff. Even the biographical notes. You know, you look at biographical notes of women in this period, and it's about who their husbands were and what they did. So I tried to write biographical notes that were really about the woman's life, even if she had a husband, and even if he did interesting things. You know, how do you write about her without talking about him? So I will just say, how much time do I have?
4 minutes.
In 4 minutes, I will very quickly say 2 names. One is a British poet named Anna Wickham. I know so much more now than I knew then. It was so interesting. I haven't looked at this in 40 years. What it says here, this is what I knew in the biographical note, was that her first poems, she's a Brit, an Australian. Her first poems were privately printed in 1911, and she was influenced, I thought, perhaps, by the women's movement. I didn't know. Now it turns out that she was connected to the suffrage movement in Britain, and I do know. But Gift to a Jade by Anna Wickham in the early 20th century. For love he offered me his perfect world. This world was so constricted and so small, it had no sort of loveliness at all. And I flung back the little silly ball. At that cold moralist, I hotly hurled his perfect, pure, symmetrical, small world. And the other, so that's 1911, and you get the idea of what I'm saying, that there is a tradition in the literature of those kinds of poems. The other one I know by heart. Her name was Adelaide Crapsey, and she lived in northern New York State. Also probably because it's around the same time, one of my contentions, but I don't have to contend it anymore, was the connection between poetry and politics. And that, 100 women marching and 100 poets writing had a bloodline between them. And our movement produced more of this literature than anything I can think of. So here's Adelaide Crapsey. It's called The Witch. When I was a girl by Nile's stream, I watched the desert stars arise. My lover, he who dreamed the Sphinx, learned all his dreaming from my eyes. I bore in Greece a burning name, and I have been in Italy Madonna to a painter lad, and mistress to Medici. And have you heard, well, I have heard of puzzled men with decorous mien, who judged the wench knows far too much, and hanged her on the Salem Green. That is our heritage.
Yeah.
By the way, the thing about the informal connections, Grace Paley and I met at a rummage sale. When I was in college in the English honors program of the University of Michigan, in the English department were no women taught at all. The poetry canon did not contain a single woman. Poetry had to be universal, which meant comfortably fitting into the world of white men of middle class or affluent status. Nothing else truly existed in literature. Nobody else truly existed in literature except as objects, never as subjects. Nothing in women's lives was worthy of literature. It was all too wet, too fleshy, too limited. Our experiences were not true except as interpreted through the male gaze. People coming to consciousness of their condition, whether my old friends Etheridge Knight and Kathy Boudin in prison cells, or women marching in the street demanding an end to the pain and shame and death of back alley abortions, often turned to poetry to express this dawning sense of selfhood, this dawning sense of community with others who are like them. Poetry is useful to those seeking to find the meaning of the experiences they share, seeking to find pride in who they are and who they're becoming. Poetry can do that. And those raucous poetry readings in the days of the women's liberation movement created a sense of community among us that was new and exciting and empowering. We had a sense of needing poetry and finding our own voice in public and in a communal way. When I called my first book of essays for the Poets on Poetry series of the University of Michigan Press, Party-Colored Blocks for a Quilt, I was reflecting a sense I had then of every woman poet being engaged in a joint enterprise. I felt a constant state of cross-fertilization with the work of other women. I felt like every time a new book of poetry came out from women touched by the women's movement, they were speaking to me and for me and telling me how to speak. This is a poem from that time, Unlearning to Not Speak. Blizzards of paper in slow motion sift through her. In nightmares, she suddenly recalls a class she signed up for but forgot to attend. Now it is too late. Now it is time for finals. Losers will be shot. Phrases of men who lectured her drift and rustle in piles. Why don't you speak up? Why are you shouting? You have the wrong answer, wrong line, wrong face. They tell her she is womb man, baby machine, mirror image, toy, earth mother and penis poor, a dish of synthetic strawberry ice cream rapidly melting. She grunts to a halt. She must learn again to speak, starting with I, starting with we, starting as the infant does with her own hunger and pleasure and rage. And the second poem of mine I'll read is one I wrote a couple of years ago for an issue of, I believe, the feminist, the academic thingy, what is it?
Feminist.
No, it
Women's studies.
that, yeah.
Women's studies. Natural. It's a thing.
I'm not an academic. When the movement, this is called When the Movement Opened Up. The 70s were like a tangerine sunrise for women like me, even women unlike me. We felt unblinded. Our super eyes saw through walls and clothing. We were suddenly sisters, sisters in every town and mountaintop and polluted valley. Oh, we were often silly. There was such pressure to discard bras, my 38 double D's flat, loose, wriggling like fat puppies under my regulation drab. But readings overflowed with hungry women eating words like chocolate cookies, drinking words like red wine, hooting and dancing and leaping. We were changed in just about everything we believe. Words, laws, pedagogy, God herself, the past, the future. Our very genes our very genes shape-changed into dynamos. Blood steamed in our veins. How we danced together in circles. We imagined all women would join us to dream and run naked and free. How could we lose? We had justice on our side like a Valkyrie. We were bold in our rage and true as compasses in our love. Remember and proceed. Now this is a poem by Sonia Sanchez. When he came home from her, he poured me on the bed and slid into me like glass, and there was a sound of splinter. Final notations, Adrian Rich. It will not be simple. It will not be long. It will take little time. It will take all your thought. It will take all your heart. It will take all your breath. It will be short. It will not be simple. It will touch through your ribs. It will take all your heart. It will not be long. It will occupy your thought. As a city is occupied, as a bed is occupied, it will take all your flesh. It will not be simple. You are coming into us who cannot withstand you. You are coming into us who never wanted to withstand you. You are taking parts of us into places we never planned. You are going far away with pieces of our lives. It will be short. It will take all your breath. It will not be simple. It will become your will. Here's Lucille Clifton, Miss Rosie. When I watch you wrapped up, by the way, Lucille Clifton had 8 children and still managed to write. What's your excuse? Miss Rosie, when I watch you wrapped up like garbage, sitting surrounded by the smell of too many potato peels, or when I watch you in your old man's shoes with a little toe cut out, sitting, waiting for your mind like next week's grocery, I say, when I watch you, you wet brown bag of a woman who used to be the best looking gal in Georgia, I stand up. Through your destruction, I stand up. This is Lynn Lifshin, my mother in the bed. No, not the way she'd say when I was 7, pulling the bottom sheet smooth. You've got to, saying hospital corners. I wet the bed much later than I should. Until just writing this, I hadn't thought of the connection. My mother would never sleep on sheets someone else had. I never saw any stains on hers, but her bedroom was a maze of powder, hairpins, black dresses. Sometimes she brings her own sheets to my house, carries toilet seat covers. Did anybody sleep in my, she always asks, her sheets, her hair, smell of smoke. But she says the rooms here smell funny. We drove at 3 a.m. slowly into Boston and strip what looks like 2 clean beds as the sky gets light, and I smooth on the form-fitted flower bottom. She redoes it. She thinks of my life as a bed only she can make right. This is Audre Lorde. Who said it was simple? There are so many roots to the tree of anger that sometimes the branches shatter before they bear. Sitting in natives, the women rally before they march, discussing the problematic girls they hired to make them free. An almost white counterman passes a waiting brother to serve them first, and the ladies neither notice nor reject the slighter pleasures of their slavery. But I, who am bound by the mirror as well as my bed, see causes in color as well as sex, and sit here wondering which me will survive these many liberations. Judy Grahn, this is from The Common Women. Carol and her crescent wrench, workbench, wooden fence, wild sands. Carol and her pipe wrench, pipe, smoke, pipeline, high climb, smoke, eyes, chicken wire. Carol and her hacksaw, well-worn, torn back, bad spine, never mind. Timberline, clear mine, Carol and her big sun, shotgun, locked done, not done, never bored, do more, do less, try to rest. Carol and her new land, small hands, big plans. Carol and her long time outshine, worn gear, warm beer, quick tears, don't stare. Carol is another hard glance, another queer chickadee like me, but Carol does everything better if you let her. gather in their poems, so we've never written part of the women's movement. And I'll just list a few names. Diana Prima, Alice Walker, Susan Griffin, June Jordan, Miriam Ruckhiser, in some ways the mother of us all. Robin Morgan, Margaret Atwood, Lucille Clift, oh I mentioned Lucille, Catherine Machin, Catherine Pollard, Ellen Bass, Toy Derricotte, Jane Cooper, Joy Harjo, and Arena Klepfitz. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here. It's been a real interesting experience.
Did you get introduced?
You we need somebody
Oh,
to.
I'm sorry.
Kate Rushin. This is mine.
Hi, my name's Kate Rushin. I'm glad to be here, and I want to thank Marge, Piercy for the invitation to be part of this panel with Louise and Alta. It's an honor.
You honor us.
It's been real interesting for me preparing for today, because I used to live in Boston. As many of you know, I was a member of the New Words Bookstore Collective. I started teaching at South Boston High when there was still a police escort for the students of color buses every morning and every afternoon. I thought about the way things were when I was in college at the end of the 60s, and we dealt with dating violence. Some of us were involved in theater. There were debates about whether or not a woman, a sister, could lead our theater group. At one point, a group of young black women wanted to get together to meet, and there was such backlash, and we were so afraid. We didn't get together to talk. So 10 years later, 1979, when I got here to Boston, things had changed because of the many movements of people in civil rights, peace, work, Black Power, Black Arts, anti-nuke, and the many, many movements of women. I first came to Boston because I had heard that Alice Walker was in town. I was living out in Cummington Community of the Arts. I was living and working out there. And I took a bus in, and I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know anything about the city. And when I got there, I realized it was a private event in a private home. And my contact wasn't there. And so I was virtually sitting alone, very awkwardly, in my black jeans and my low-top Converse and my natural hair, and I felt very out of place. That is until a particular group of women walked in the door. And they were also dressed casually. And wonder of wonders, they spoke to me and they introduced themselves. And later I found out it was Barbara Smith, Demita Frazier, Mercedes Tompkins, Beverly Smith, Charlene McCrae, women of the Combahee River Collective. That chance meeting led to an invitation from Barbara to take part in a two-day event that many of you were at. 1979 was a terrible time when black women were being murdered all across various neighborhoods in Boston. And not surprisingly, because it still happens today, the murders were treated as isolated incidents. and was also implied in the press that perhaps something about the women's lifestyle had led to their deaths, as if insinuations that some of the women might have been involved with prostitution had anything to do with solving the murders, or had anything to do with the larger issue of the value of Black women's lives. So Barbara Smith, working with a number of groups, including the Combahee River Collective, the Black Feminist Retreat, the Bessie Smith Collaborative, and the Support Group for Women's Safety, came together to organize 2 nights of poetry. The Friday night event, which was July 6, 1979, was at the Solomon Carter Fuller Mental Health Center in Roxbury, and there were 12 of us local Black women poets who were invited to speak, including Barbara Smith, Diana Christmas, Misha Shariat Brown, and myself. And Audre Lorde came and read at that event too. And that was a very, well, I can't even describe what that event meant to me and what it led to for me. And that night, Audre read Need, a Chorale for Black Woman Voices, in honor of 2 Black women who had been murdered. And she enlisted us, local poets, to be her chorus. And I'll just read from the end of it, from part 4, from Need by Audre Lorde. The simplest part of this poem is the truth in each one of us to which it is speaking. I'll repeat. The simplest part of this poem is the truth in each one of us to which it is speaking. How much of this truth can I bear to see and still live unblinded? How much of this pain can I use? And then she quotes Barbara Deming. We cannot live without our lives. And then all of us together, we cannot live without our lives. It's Audre Lorde. The next night, Audre Lorde and Adrienne Rich filled Saunders Theater at Harvard to the rafters with their powerful poetry. And one of the things I remember that night, and maybe you remember it too, is that Audrey and Adrienne would not let you clap. So they would read these incredible poems and we'd be ready to clap. And they said, nope, hold it, hold on to that energy, take it out into the world, and do your work. So I'm going to read another poem by Audrey and one by Adrienne. This is a poem by Audrey that I found in a limited edition poetry chapbook that was produced by Audrey and her sister and her students at Tougaloo College in 1968. She was an artist in residence there. And an earlier version of the poem was included in a speech she gave in 1963. And this is her preface. I came to Tougaloo College in the spring of 1968 to conduct a 5-week poetry workshop. I found there a group of young people writing with great pride, excitement, and power. This collection of their poetry is lovingly dedicated to the members of the Tougaloo Poetry Workshop. The chapbook was called Pound, and I realized that they had taken the title from a poem by my Oberlin professor, Calvin C. Hurton. This is a poem called by Audre Lorde. The title is Audre Lorde. I am a Black woman and a poet. All 3 things stand outside the realm of choice. My eyes have a part in my seeing, my breath in my breathing, and all that I am in who I am. All who I love are of my people. it is not simple. I was not born on a farm nor in a forest, but in the center of the largest city in the world, a member of the human race hemmed in by stone and away from earth and sunlight. But what is in my blood and skin of richness, of brown earth and noon sun, and the strength to love them, comes the roundabout journey from Africa through the Sun Islands to the stony coast. And these are the gifts through which I sing, through which I see. This is my knowledge of the sun and how to love, even where there is no sunlight. This is the knowledge and richness I give my children proudly as a strength against the less obvious forms of narrowness and night. The poet, Audre Lorde.
She is so nice and handsome.
Excuse us.
We'll probably get to stay
There we go.
overtime if they like.
All right, and now here is, here's Adrian Rich. I came back up in last fall when Adrian passed. The New Words Remnants had an event, a memorial for her at MIT. Tattered Kaddish by Adrian Rich. Taurian reaper of a wild apple field, messenger from earth mire, gleaning transcripts of fog. In the 19th year and the 11th month, speak your tattered Kaddish for all suicides. Praise to life, though it crumbled in like a tunnel on ones we knew and loved. Praise to life, though its windows blew shut on the breathing room of ones we knew and loved. Praise to life, though ones we knew and loved it badly, too well and not enough. Praise to life, though it tightened like a knot on the hearts of ones we thought we knew loved us. Praise to life, giving room and reason to ones we knew and loved who felt unpraisable. Praise to them, how they loved it when they could. And then I'm going to read poems of my own that I wrote. This is Priorities for a Poetry Reading for Adrian Rich. You must use the cane. The cane must be clear lucite. You must measure your steps against pain. The leggings must be purple and black. You must keep your poet's oath, and so give homage to Wallace Stevens, Muriel Rukeyser, and Jimmy Santiago Baca, then tumble us down cascades of history punctuated by your landscapes. You must safeguard your strength, so you graciously inform us that even though you won't, you would, in fact, rather go out drinking with us. And this one is for Audrey. At another crossroads. You leave this place with the same gifts you brought with you. Your questions, your laughter, your actions, your anger. take this charge with you. Pass through the gate to widen the gate. Then storm the gate. Dismantle the gate. Build a gate. Be a gateway. Then storm the gate. Dismantle the gate. And so on. For your journey, I remind you of Audrey's gift. Audre Lorde, poet laureate, change agent itinerant, courageous gatekeeper, glorious gate crasher. She left this question for all of us to use. Are you willing to use the power that you have in the service of what you say you believe? Are you willing to use the power you have in the service of what you say you believe? For your journey, I give you poetry, the delicious unpredictability of love and living things. For your journey, I give you this mirror reflecting your own sweet eyes.
Okay, Alta.
This is Alta.
I brought every book I've ever written, and I'm going to read all of them. Okay, I've been publisher of Shameless Lassie Press, 1969, 1988. If you don't have any of our books, you can look online. They're selling from $27 to $165. I've got a few on the table for $5 and $10. This is a picture of me in a famous shirt. It says, "Stare at your own damn tits." And this is one of our early catalogs. I had already published Susan Griffin, Paul Mariah, and Pat Parker. And coming up that year were Mitsu Yamada and Tazaki Shande. I'm the first publisher of For Colored Girls who have considered suicide.
Controlling the means of production, it's called.
And
My
it
son.
turned out, so I do have 2 copies for Colored Girls, but their second printings were out of the first printings. But I do have 2 copies, and they're not cheap, but I'm willing to sell them. And we have 1 copy of Camp Notes by Mitsu Yamada. And it turned out this book was a much bigger breakthrough than I realized. When we published this book, none of the books about the internment camps for Japanese had been published for decades! She was locked up. She was 17. I always cry at readings. This is Mitsu, the night before goodbye. Mama is mending my underwear while my brothers sleep. Her husband taken away by the FBI. One son lured away by the army. Now another son and daughter lusting for the free world outside. She must let go. The war goes on. She will take one still small son and join Papa in internment to make a family. Still sewing, squinting in the dim light, in room C, barrack 4, block 4, she whispers, "Remember, keep your underwear in good repair. Don't bring shame on us." Okay, so Shameless Hussy started with love poems to women, and
with love poems to men. And when I published letters to women, I couldn't find any lesbian love poems except Sappho. And my buddy here knows of another poet from, what, the 15th century. And how do you say her name?
Sorbonne, Estella Cruz, and Joan Martin had translated her
Oh.
later.
Right, there are a bunch in here, Kathleen Phillips.
Yes.
A lot of them were published with
We
pronouns.
can't hear you.
A lot of the poets, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
A lot of the poets before us were published with the pronouns changed. To he instead of she, but there's a long line. Sorry.
Good for you, Louise. So I'm going to read.
Collective help.
I'm going to read 2 or 3 poems from letters to women. To Brenda, soft to be with you, soft the touch of you. Then your brown hands caress my hair, soft your thigh to lean my head on, soft to whisper, kiss, whisper, kiss. And back in the day, men just felt they could do anything. And they practically did. I was pregnant and my husband was working on People's Park. So he was planting things and I was nearby watching him. And a woman named Mary came up and she had a guy with her. And I was very pregnant. And the man reached out, touched me before I could stop him with my breasts all the way down. So I punched him. And here's this moment. You shot his nose bleeding all down his lip. Alta, how could you? You didn't care what he did to me. I should have been gentle. With friends like you, who needs husbands. Okay, Laura X always wants me to read a piece called Pretty. Well, I don't have that book here. I have a few copies of this book, which my husband, John Oliver Simon, published. But we never got them stapled. So if you buy this book, you need to be careful to keep it folded.
Find the stapler.
And then find a stapler copy mat, you know, to get your copy mat. Okay, the Gospel according to St. Alta. Happy bodies are a nice place to be. I hear beautiful women are supposed to be 36, 26, 36. Remember that? Yeah. They were telling us we were all supposed to. Okay. I got news for them. I am 40, 30, 40, and I am beautiful. In fact, when I was 44, 36, 46, I was beautiful. If I'm beautiful, anything I am is beautiful. I'm big. Big is beautiful. I have short brown hair. Short brown hair is beautiful. My legs are hairy. Hairy legs are beautiful. I'm 30. 30 is beautiful. My pussy smells like pussy juice. My armpits smell like sweat. Pussy juice and sweat smell beautiful. Repeat after me. I just love it that people like that last name.
We love everything. We love all of it.
Okay, I'm going to read 3 poems from the book that's now out of print. There was nothing like this when I was young. It's called Mama, a Star on All the Untold Stories, published by Times Change Press. I couldn't find any books about what it was like to be a mother. I just read a thing in the New York Times. A woman said, I'm so tired of all these books about women who are mothers. And I thought, yes! Nothing else is as beautiful as this. Nothing else fills your eyes with the glory of it, the face of your child asleep. older daughter had been calling me Sklar, who does a lot of our drawings, Aunt Baby. So when my younger daughter went for her nap, I asked her to kiss me. She refused, saying, "She's icky. She's an ant." And this is one of the things I got known for, which is telling the truth, even when it makes me look bad. California, 1972. I walk past those homes and hear the mothers striking the children. I am one of the mothers striking the children. And the screams of us trapped animals striking one another and screaming and screaming. I stand outside, uncertain, should I knock and offer myself, or would it shame them, frighten them? Would they hit each other harder? And would they hate me besides? So I have turned the corner, and I can no longer hear the screams. Yes, you can. I can no longer hear the screams. Okay, now the happier note. Here's a poem. A friend tried to set me up on a blind date with one man. He went and looked at my phones in the library and he stood me up. I said, "Daddy, he stood me up." She said, "I have to find out why." He said, "I read that woman's poetry. She hates men." So here's one poem that could be interpreted that way. I have 2 copies of this book of Facebook. It's been out of print for a while, and I have 2 copies here. Most women are shorter than most men. It's easy to overlook us. Unless we stick our fingers into your eyes and say, "Look at me, buddy," or you won't be able to see at all. Okay.
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Oh, good. I have more poems. Okay. My third husband was a master mechanic and a classical guitarist. So guess what he got paid for? He got paid to fix machines. Women's lib hits home. I used to do things like walk in the house, sit down and look at Angel and say, "My car battery is dead." I can print a book, swim 3 miles. I even fixed the brakes on my Volkswagen. Still, as he came home exhausted from work, I would hit it with things like, "The basement is full of water." Men could do things like that. They really could. It's because of their big peepees. Okay, I'll read one short story and then a couple of things from my new book. This was hot off the press. I just picked up 60 copies on Saturday, so I only have about 8 here. But it's about, I was diagnosed with MS 33 years ago, and the doctor told me I had 2 years to live. I said, "I can't die in 2 years. I got kids in school." So, and then last year I was diagnosed with cancer, and they said, "Well, you might have 6 months." And I said, no, been here, done that. So I've had the surgery, I'm going through chemo, and this book is called Another Moment, because right now I'm having another moment. Okay, so here's a short story about my daughter and me at a book fair in New Orleans, French Quarter. After a night of music, my elder daughter and I walked back to the hotel. I heard footsteps and turned to see 5 white skinheads. Looking around, I saw no other people except a couple of black guys in the parking lot across the wide boulevard. "Okay, kid," I said, "don't look now." Okay, she answered. There are 5 guys following us, so we're going to walk toward those guys across the street. Without missing a step, she said, okay, Mom, I understand you don't like the guys behind us. Are you sure you like the ones in front of us? I don't know, but I know I don't like the guys behind us. As we crossed the boulevard, I said, that's an odd-looking booth. She said, Mom, you don't have your glasses? That's not a booth. It's a Pepsi machine, and 3 drunk guys are kicking it. That's what we're walking toward. Oh, fine. I looked again at the white guys behind us. They were closer, and one of them muttered, bitch, as I looked at him. How far is our hotel? 3 blocks. We continued walking towards what I could now see was a vending machine. One guy was kicking and saying, motherfucker, bitch, motherfucker. I said, I bring you all this way for cultural experiences, and it sounds like our neighborhood in Oakland. As we walked up behind them, one of them turned. He was gigantic, 6.5 feet tall, and easy 240 pounds. He stared at me. You sure you know what you're doing, Mom? No. We stopped a few feet behind them. I looked at the tall guy, and he looked back at me. Without moving, I flicked my eyes, and he turned, moving his shoulders carefully. He faced the 5 white punks. He flexed his arms and moved his shoulders. I stepped next to him and got in a karate position. One skinhead stopped from that step. His foot was like this, and then it went like that. The others backed up. There was a moment of real silence. Then one said, let's split, and they took off running around the corner. The big guy kept his gaze on them. When he looked back at me, I nodded, and he nodded. And then my daughter and I walked to the hotel. Mother, she was holding my arm. I was shaking. I will bet you everything you own, those guys have never been approached by white women for protection. Really? Think about it. This isn't Oakland. This is New Orleans. 2 blocks later, we turned to see him still watching after us. We waved, and he nodded. And we stepped into the chandelier-encrusted lobby of our hotel. Woo.
Yeah, it's done.
It's done. Okay, thank you very much.
I'd like permission to read.
Huh?
We can go till 3:20.
Yeah, we want to also involve y'all. That's the idea.
Yeah, I was asking permission to read a poem, but talking about Audrey.
Go ahead.
I
And
would
then I'll
like to
do
read
this
an
and wrap it up.
apology for her. It sort of brought everything back. She was a very dear friend, Audrey Lord. Is it okay if I read this?
Yes.
Elegy in Rock for Audrey Lord. A child, I cherished the polyhedron of salt my father brought up from under Detroit. The pure crystal from the deep mine. The miracle was it felt hard and clear as glass, and yet the tongue said tears. My other treasure was a polished shard of anthracite that glittered on my palm, harder, fiercer than the soft coal we shoveled into the basement furnace, coal halfway to a diamond. More than once you and I talked about rocks for which you had a passion, curiosity fired by adventure, reading the landscape with eye and pick, cliffs that confided in a lover's whisper their history. Obsidian, the obvious. It can take an edge, can serve as a knife in ritual or combat, as your fine, dark, deep voice could pour out love or take an edge like a machete. carnelian lips, black and rose marble, metamorphose rock into beauty. But what you are now, that only the work remains, is garnet, not a flashy jewel, native, smoldering female. Garnet, the blackest red, the color of the inner woman of deep sex, the color of the inside of the lid closed tight while the eye still searches for light in itself. Sand is the residue, the pulverized bones of mountains. Here on the great beach in summer, the sea rolls over and bears slabs of tawny sand that glitter, little buffed worlds of garnet, pool like shadows of old blood under the sun's yellow stare. On my palm they wink, the shading like rouge stippling the sand. You told me of a garnet big as a child's head. You told me of garnets glowing like women's stories pulled from the dust. Garnets you freed into the sun, lying on your palm like summer nights. Rich darkness I praise, dark richness, the true color of a live pulsing heart. Blackberries and strong sunlight, rose colors, black tulip chalices, the city sky glowering from the plain. Audrey, Audrey, your work shines on the night of the world, the blaze of your words. But your own female power and beauty are gone, a garnet ground into powder and dissolved into wine the earth drinks.
Goes without,
Dear friend, and
to all of us.
Poems just
all of us.
got me.
Thank you. It goes without saying, since we talked for days about how our history gets written and what's been left out and what needs to be recorded, so let it be recorded that the poets of our time really were revolutionaries, and that we, I'll say we, redefined everything, what a poem was, how it got published, what you could write about, and then we're really funny. Thank you, Alta, for that we redefine, you know, that the revolution against, quote, respectability was so much part of our movement. And sometimes we get a little too polite in talking about our history. So I'm going to end. I will say, if people are talking about their favorites, I didn't bring a poem by June Jordan, but her we could all take as an anthem one title, which is I Must Become a Menace to My Enemies. That's my favorite June Jordan title. This is called Wild Women Blues. I've got a different system and a way of my own. When my man starts kicking, I let him find another home. I get full of good liquor. I walk the street all night, go home and put my man out. If he don't treat me right, wild women don't worry, and wild women don't have the blues. You never get nothing by being an angel child. You better change your ways and get real wild. I want to tell you something. I wouldn't tell you no lie. Wild women are the only kind that really get by, 'cause wild women don't worry, Wild Women Don't Have the Blues by the great poet Ida Cox.
Yeah.
As I was saying, questions, conversation, but I wouldn't mind if someone wants to share memories too about this world in which we have all lived, or whatever. Speak. Yes.
I just wanted to add another poet to Marge Piercy.
He wants to add a poet.
Yeah.
Add a poet.
Oh, this is not, could have gone on for hours.
Right, we all could. What do you want to add?
Janice Miracantani in
Yes.
San Francisco.
Yes.
And her mother was a leader in the fight to get reparations for all the land that was taken away from Japanese Americans.
Janice?
Miracantani, she was also the
Miracantani.
program director for Glide Church, the
Oh, yeah.
progressive churches in the...
Oh, yeah. Cesar Chavez's church. Thank you. More? Speak. Yes. Hi.
Hi, I just wanted to give a plug for something that's going on this weekend in Washington, D.C., which is a poetry festival called Split This Rock. And Split This Rock is a poetry festival which continues on their traditions of discussing race and class and youth poetry, and many of the women that are represented here today, and many of the poets that we've all come to love are some of the poets that are being spoken. But more to the point, anybody can subscribe and get these amazing poems once a week from women and men that are doing poetry that's addressing race and class and social justice. It's called Split This Rock. The poetry festival happens every 2 years. And right now it's going on.
Everybody hear that? Split This Rock. And you can subscribe and get poems. Yes.
Well, I just have to say, the memory that Kate, this whole conference has been surreal, and we've all said that. It's just present and past all together. But Kate, I want to tell you something that I never shared with you before. You were really an inspiration as a poet, for those of us in our poet closets, poets, fierce, poets, loud. Alta, I saw you read in California one time, you blew the roof off the building. But poets delicate and poets complex. You really, by reading and sharing those poems that you did, it sort of opened a closet inside of me. And I'll never forget that sensation and the memory of being 14 and hiding my poems.
Wow.
And being told by a teacher when I got to my classical high school that she had never read a black woman poet. And then some 15 or whatever years later, at that reading for Alice in Wellesley, wasn't it? Was it Wellesley or Newton? We were somewhere out in the burbs.
Yeah, I don't know.
I just remember meeting you and getting that poet delicate, which I so appreciated because that was a flavor that was missing. And I just really, I'm so glad you brought that memory up because it, it was really a profound moment, a private moment. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, first of all, I loved listening to the poetry being read. It's wonderful. It was wonderful to hear it out loud. My question is, you had, Louise, you had posed the parallel between poetry and politics. And I'm not universalizing this statement, but there is a definite trend these days among younger people doing poetry towards the I. And it's about just the individual. And one of the things that's striking, and there's a parallel with the politics towards just individual expression, individual identity versus actually collective.
Selfie.
Yeah, selfies versus collective liberation, collective struggle. And one of the things that was striking me listening is how much there's a deeply personal, but it's not individualistic. And I just wonder if you could talk some about how you see that, and what it was like writing that way, any reflections you have for the changes. I don't know what you want to say about that, but I just would love to hear you respond to that.
Sure. I'm going to let everybody respond, but I want to say that Marge began by saying that she wrote for and from a community.
Yeah.
That's part of the answer, right?
There is also a fear of emotion in the poetry that's being churned out by MFAs now. You don't reveal anything, so you don't really deal with the stuff that you have to deal with. You sort of make it very oblique so that you're never really dealing with it. I see huge numbers of poems by the MFAs that are being churned out, which is, by the way, a real scam because there are over 1,200 people, universities turning out MFAs. What the fuck is going to happen to all these people? Are they going to teach someplace? Maybe for a year and then...
Maybe if they learn to tune cars.
Actually, I don't think that works so well now, but plumbing is great. Plumbing is still needed. Car tuning is so specialized now. Anything to do with cars is a computer thing, so I don't recommend that. I used to, 20, 30 years ago, I used to tell poets to become printers.
So they could, in the very least, turn out their own poems. But now I think skills, real world skills, which bring you in contact with other people.
Do we have any young poets in the house, or anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Did you raise your hand?
No, Kate, I thought you were going to respond.
Oh, just, who's young?
I would just echo what Marge was saying, that, we can use our own experience to connect with other people rather than to wall ourselves off from other people, or, to hide what's really going on with us. As Audre Lorde said, to paraphrase what she said, that poetry is a way to give name to the nameless so that it can be thought. I mean, we put things out there about ourselves to deal with them, and also to connect with other people in real ways.
I have a thought that we may not know about it. That's my thought. Because now this book is published by Alfred A. Knopf, okay?
Yes.
But at the beginning,
Yes.
it was not published. Who was your first publisher?
Wesleyan University Press.
Oh, well, I just remember, I'm talking about the
Yeah,
means
but
of,
right
there may
now,
be
I think-
Chicanos who read poetry at meetings that I don't know a thing about, or you.
Yeah.
And there may be, I don't know, in every corner of America. I don't, that's about the fragmentation.
That's what I'm saying. I'm less trying to make a verdict or assertion about all, I don't know all the poetry of today, but I am curious to hear people speak to how you explored writing it in a deeply personal way, but not individualistic, because
Yeah.
I think that's something people can learn from. Listening to it spoken, it was very striking, the sense that it was intimate, but it was not isolated or something, so
Right.
that's just,
I
yeah.
think part of what our generation did was also redefine what poetry, I mean, before that, a poetry reading was very stiff and very respectable, and I think you've gotten this.
In a monotone and.
Yes, and they would read like W.H. Auden. And as I think you've seen, but you probably all remember, it was like a labor rally, as far as I'm concerned, like, right on, sister, and you say it, and go, no matter. So the high-low culture thing, right? Am I right? No, this is my experience.
It was totally mushed.
It was so mushed. I mean, look what you have here. People with degrees, people not degrees, people with, I also will say out loud that the next time someone says it was an all-white women's movement, you could spit in their
Bugger
face.
off.
Yeah.
It wasn't all white,
I mean,
it wasn't middle class. I was organizing on the
all
Cape.
of, yeah, but all the work
Money at all.
tells you that. Whatever we say about it, there's the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to say something?
I was going to say, I'm from the Bay Area and know Alta's work, and this morning when I was on a panel about different cities, I felt like, oh God, all these cities, they've had these city organizations, and felt like San Francisco and the Bay Area, we didn't have like these one. We had the most incredible poets and some extraordinary artists. And when you're saying, where is the poetry now? We have an anti-displacement, anti-eviction movement happening, and there was an event recently about 2 artists who were being evicted in the Mission District, people who helped start the Day of the Dead celebration, whatever, and there was incredible poetry and drumming and all sorts of things at that event at the Brava Theater. And one of the best, in the last bunch of years poetry event was when we got a bunch of poets together around the invasion of Iraq, and it was standing room only. So I think there's something that happens when the poets and social movements and organizing happen, and then those poets, came forth.
Poetry is decentralized. The New York establishment is one thing. Mostly poems they give enormous amounts of prizes to that nobody fucking really cares about and nobody fucking reads, except academics who write dissertations on them. All over the United States there are poets. There are regional poets. You mentioned Jimmy Vaca, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and he's well known in his area, and but I don't think anybody in New York's ever heard of him. Well, of course.
But I'm a citizen of the world.
Yeah. Poetry is very decentralized, and I'm pleased with that. It's alive in all kinds of places, and people do things all the time. Martina Espada and I did a poetry reading the summer before last for affordable housing. He comes out of tenant organizing, so that was his big thing. And I've done, readings for all kinds of causes, and poets do that. And they do it just to raise money. Sometimes, like for a friend who has cancer and who didn't have health insurance. This sort of thing goes on all the time. It's not visible high culture. It doesn't get grants. We don't get any prizes. But people relate to what we do.
But I think that, okay, in 1 second,
Sorry.
poor trash New York, in poor trashed New York, the Occupy movement, as far as I saw, did not have a lot of poets. It had other things. There are other forms of art, of creativity that had a more immediate, that appealed to the people who are doing Occupy New York. And I can't say what that is or isn't, but there's something there. I think political art is less available.
I think Occupy Boston had some poetry.
Yeah, they're doing things. I'm sorry, Kate wanted to say something about that.
Yeah, I just, I thought a minute about your question, and I just wanted to say a word about the bridge poem and how that came about. As I said, I met Barbara Smith and other people from the Combahee River Collective by accident, and because they were polite to me, because they reached out to me. And another reading that Barbara invited me to was the pre-publication reading for this bridge called My Back, which was here in Boston. Now, a lot of the writers from the West Coast, and so what Barbara and Cherie did is that they asked local women to read one poem by a poet who couldn't be present in Boston. And Barbara called me up and asked me to take part in the reading. And she said, oh, you can read something of your own. She told me the title. And I said, oh, I've got a draft of a poem called The Bridge Poem that I've been working on. Maybe I can work it up well enough to be able to read it at the reading. And so I think I read a poem by Christos, and then I read the bridge poem, and Cherie Moraga walked up to the front and said, can we have that poem for the anthology? People think that the title of the anthology was taken from my poem. Not true. The title is from a conversation that Barbara Smith and Beverly Smith had about women bridging. And one of them said something about women bridging, the other one said something about, yeah, but a bridge gets walked on. The reason the poem is in the front of the book, my bridge poem is in the front of the book because the galleys were already together. If you look at it, my poem doesn't have a page. I'm on Roman numerals. But my point is that a lot of us were having some of the same experiences and the same frustrations in the classroom, on the job, in academic programs. And because we had this community, we were able to come together and speak to each other and understand more about what we were going through individually. So the fact that there was this group, this organization, this publishing house, helped me finish the poem and then get it out into the world.
We ran over.
Yay!
We ran over.
So how do we find, let us know I've got some YCTV cards, I'll just write my phone number on. How's that?